So, you're new to Pathfinder, you're a little uncomfortable with role playing, you don't know exactly what to do, how to feel comfortable. Or maybe you have some friends who don't talk all that much at the table, and you think if they talked more, they would have more fun. Let's talk about how to have engaging, dynamic, in conversation characters at a Pathfinder table. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben U here for another Pathfinder 2nd Edition video, and today's video is going to be much more freeform than normal. I have 3 weekends of travel in a row, and 3 conventions in a row is tough. So rather than write out kind of detailed script notes and make a presentation, I'm just going to be doing some talking at the camera today. And I want to talk about role play. Before I do, let me just say thank you so much to everyone who said hello at Mega MooseCon. I had a blast at that event. I met a bunch of wonderful people. Athena and Ed and Cameron and so many others, and Thomas. Just thank you all very much for making my weekend wonderful. And so, as a quick overview here, today I want to think about who is your character in terms of things like backstory. I want to do a little bit of talking about voices and how you should be presenting your character to kind of differentiate when am I the player talking versus when is my PC talking. I'm going to talk about when you should talk, meta talking, and then I'm going to give some GM advice. And I'm making this video because 2 things lined up simultaneously. There was this Reddit thread, has anyone else had this experience in online games, that kind of had a negative impression of gaming online. And I have some thoughts beyond what has been said in these threads, and I wanted to talk about that. And I had kind of mentally bookmarked this as something that was going to be my next video topic. And then I was listening to Not Another D&D podcast, great podcast, by the way, on my way home from Atlanta, and they had hit on some similar notes. So I figured, okay, this seems like a great time to talk about this, so let's jump into it. So at a fundamental level, I think in order to roleplay successfully, you need to understand your character. And I'm going to go into some very, very basic theater stuff for a second here. I'm not a theater expert. I have been in a couple of plays. I have directed a plays. I kind of know what I'm doing, but that's as far as I'm going to go. And I think there is a very big difference between picking up a script and reading the script and having read the whole story, going back through, understanding that character's motivations and their thought patterns and their behaviors and their quirks, and then reading that again. For those of you who were around for early English adaptations of anime, a lot of times the people who were reading those lines didn't really understand what the context was. They didn't really understand who those characters were going to be. And so a lot of that voice acting fell flat. So I think if you are going to have fun role-playing your character, the first thing you need to do is understand who your character is. And I don't think you need to have pages upon pages upon pages of backstory, and I have probably used this in a video elsewhere, but this is the information that I make for myself when I am DMing. I ask this from my players, or when I am a PC, I make this for myself because it helps me to get into the head of my character. Because you might spend a while physically designing what your character looks like on something like Hero Forge, and you might get invested in the mechanics on something like Path Builder. But there is another component of fleshing out that person so you can roleplay them, and that is figuring out who they are. What is their personality like? What is their weakness? Are they greedy? Are they pig-headed? Do they rush into situations? Are they afraid to act? What are their needs? Are they looking for affection? Are they looking for approval? Are they looking for money? Are they looking for a relationship? Are they trying to do something that their family will be proud of? What is making this person tick? And who are their enemies? What person or thing or organization is really going to push their buttons? An enemy doesn't always mean I'm going to kill you. Sometimes it is a rival. And sort of the opposite of that, who are your allies? Who are you going to work with? And these allies and enemy things can be really important because if your character is just opposed to some organization and you see a member of that organization, like it might be on site with your character. And if you didn't flush that out ahead of time, you might have a much more mild reaction to seeing someone from that organization. And I also think it is really useful to have every PC have a secret of some kind. What is the thing that they don't want other people to know? And this might be tied into their personality or their weakness or their enemies or their allies. And I think this is the start of doing good roleplay. You need to figure out what is driving your character because that is going to really influence when your character is going to step in. You might be at a table of 3 other PCs, you might be at a table of 5 other PCs. Just in terms of sharing time, you can't always be in the spotlight. If you understand your character, you're gonna know when your character needs to say something, and you're gonna have a better idea of when your character would say something. So let's do a practical example here. The name of the character I am currently playing is Nyx, and she is a witch warper with the fan dancer archetype. And her personality very much craves excitement. She loves to fight. She loves to dance. She loves doing things. So if she is put into fights, like she is dancing around, she is ready to go. If there is a, big social situation with a lot of thing happening, like she will be in the limelight in those situations. I have on her character sheet that I made for this, her weakness is desk work and waiting. She cannot stand boredom. If there is nothing going on, she is going to kind of slink back, not say a lot of stuff, get bored, maybe sneak off, maybe try to get into some trouble. And she's not going to be someone who likes rules and policy and procedure. And even with just that much information, that is going to give you a good feel of when your character would be talking, right? And if you start going into needs and desires and enemies and allies, and you develop a good sense of self for your character, you're probably going to be in good shape as far as the role playing goes. So let's talk about voices a little bit. And I'm sure there are videos by very talented voice actors who can talk about what I'm going to talk about in much better detail and with more experience in what I'm going to say. I like to have a different character voice from my own voice, and I don't think it needs to be anything too flashy. Generally speaking, I'm pretty good at this sort of stuff. So I had a turtle character that is a turtle person character in D&D named Zig Condor Killer. He was a barbarian rogue who didn't brain so good. He wasn't very smart. Zig talked like this, very slowly, with simple words. And this is very, very different from how I talk, right? I tend to talk relatively quickly, but Zig talks like this. And Zig takes deeper and slower breaths. And Zig tends to use kind words. And you can very much feel the difference in energy between what I am doing and what that character Zig might have been doing. And I like giving characters speech quirks. Even if you're not good at voices, what might your character do to represent where they're from? Do they have a little quirk that they do? Do they not say but they do something else of that nature every time? And they're always like, let's see here. That can be something that you could do, and that gives your character some flavor. And you can kind of think about the like social class of your character if you want to start getting into that. Are they going to be an erudite scholar with a lot of high vocabulary? Or are they going to talk like a common person? Are they just going to be, a person from the streets who doesn't know those big words? Another character I played, her name was Sasha Thema, Queen of Anathema, Lord of the Seventh Layer of Hell, or something like that. It's been a little while. But whenever she would introduce herself, she would go on this like full title thing because she was very, very egotistical. And it was very much, who am I, not who are you? I want you to know who I am. I want you to know the title that I have. And even if you're not the best with changing voices, if you change your speech pattern and you start thinking about how this person would talk, which might be related to that stuff in section 1, right? Their personalities, their weaknesses, their goals. You're probably going to make a more well-rounded character that you're going to have more fun role-playing. And kind of last note on this section, if you can't switch around your voice kind of at will, don't do that. That's fine. Do what is going to be comfortable and fun for you. Remember, Pathfinder is a game. You want to play the game in a way that is going to be fun for you. If you are going to be super stressed out by trying to do this, don't do it. But if you think this would be fun to do, don't be afraid to practice some voices in the shower or whatever. Practice some voices in the car on the way to work. I, as a DM, absolutely do that, and I will, occasionally do something kind of silly and fun, and people tend to remember it. I was at Mega Moose Con, and I played an android for the first time. My android was Shroud. He talked like this, short sentences, very efficient, to the point, always following whatever the prime directive was. And I think people got a kick out of that. You don't have to be crazy or over the top. You don't need to be a Matt Mercer, but I have more fun when I embrace the role-playing elements of the game. It is not all about combat all the time. Although, boy, do I love a good combat. All right, next up. When should I talk and how much should I say? And I think the type of game that you are going to be playing in changes this a little bit. Let's imagine first that you are playing at a table of strangers, maybe online, maybe in person. And let's say that you're playing something like a Pathfinder Society game at a convention. You have a 4-hour block of time to finish this event and be completely wrapped up before the next event gets in there. In these sorts of scenarios, you're on rails. You've got a set time limit and you've got stuff to get through. In these sorts of situations, I think very light roleplay is good. Some quips, some banter. I don't think this is the time to monologue. When you're doing character introductions, I don't think you need to say, I am Shalafax, Lord of the Night. I was a mercenary, trained by assassins, but then the assassins betrayed me. And now, cloaked in shadows, I am on a quest to... I don't think you need to be going that deep in things like Pathfinder Society games and convention play. But I think if all you are doing is, okay, I'm going to make a charisma check of some kind to convince this NPC. Blah, 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 blah. Roll the dice. 23. Okay, you succeed. They say this. I think that is very, very boring. And that's not what I'm there to do. And in the next section, I'm going to talk about what you might do as a GM to incentivize people to kick it up a notch beyond just literal dice rolls determining everything. If you are not under strict time constraints, I would say roleplay as much as you can without it feeling like you are stepping on the toes of other people. And I would think about time as a pie graph here. And everybody should get a piece of the pie. Let's say there's 4 players and a GM. That's 5 pieces of pie. Now the GM, they get the first piece of pie. They get to determine if they want the biggest piece of the pie or the smallest piece of the pie. And then everyone else, they should get some pie too. But that pie doesn't always need to be divided evenly. sometimes you can have a little more pie, and sometimes you can have a little less pie. I like to drag other players into my roleplay as much as possible because it's not just about me. So if I think my character would be struggling with a choice, I might go, Carl, this is a difficult decision. I require data input. What do you believe is the best course of action? And then that brings someone else directly into the role play, and you give someone else opportunities to get in there and contribute meaningfully to a conversation. And I think it is okay for you as a player to create small scenes with other people. I don't think every single scene has to involve every player at the table, but I really, really, really try to be conscious of people's time. And in most cases, I try not to say more than a few sentences at a time without having someone else having a chance to jump in. And that's something I believe as both a GM and as a player. The storytelling should be cooperative. And so if you are doing all of the talking, it's not really cooperative. And I can understand the mechanics behind Pathfinder sometimes making the role playing weird, where you go, okay, I'm untrained in deception. We are level 12. I can't possibly deceive this person at all. I shouldn't even try. And I think you've got two approaches there. Number one is, if you're untrained in deception, why are you role playing that character as if they are deceptive? And approach number two is roleplay your fucking heart out and then say, hey, GM, I'm untrained in this role. Can I follow the expert on someone else who was in this conversation? Or can we use their modifier for my role for this because this was a group conversation? And as a GM in a lot of spots, my immediate response to that would be, hell yeah, absolutely. Because I think it is more fun to reward roleplay. And on the GM side, you don't always have to use level DC for everything. If someone, role played their heart out and had an awesome, awesome monologue or something, you can make that DC 5. You can just do that. You're allowed. You can just say, they are convinced by this. You don't need to make a roll. That's totally fine too. The Pathfinder rules are great and crunchy and clear, and I love them a lot. But sometimes the game gets in the way of the story and the roleplay, and I think it is important to recognize in those moments that you want to be encouraging your players to be involved in the game, and so reward them for being involved in the game. And if you sometimes need to hand wave some mechanics or make a DC reasonable for that PC, I think that's totally fine. And I find this is particularly important when low level characters are in social situations with high level characters, just by the very nature of that level difference. If you are using that higher level character's DC versus the low level party members, they are going to have a bad time trying to roll deception high enough or, do things with their own passive perception. So a little wiggle room, a little grace is occasionally worth a lot of good. And other PCs, remember things like the aid action and guidance exist. If you know that someone has poor stats for something and you can do something to give them a bump, they will certainly appreciate that. Honestly, even if they have high stats, if you can do something that gives them a bump, they're still gonna appreciate it. So just kind of summarizing this section here. Respect the time of others, and when you can, create opportunities that allow other people to shine. And I think this is true whether you're the player or you're the GM. Give other people moments in the sun, give other people reasonable choices and chances to have input and do the whole cooperative storytelling thing because it is a ton of fun. I'm going to reference a specific Starfinder scenario here. I'm going to talk in generality so I don't spoil anything, as this is a relatively new scenario. But there is a scenario called the Great Absalon Relay that is a lot of fun, and it is a very combat light scenario. And at the beginning of the scenario, the GM was taking our stuff and said, yeah, I don't really need your armor class or defensive classes or perception or anything like that for the video. Sorry, for this scenario. This is going to be a roleplay heavy scenario. If all you do is roll the dice, this will be over quickly and won't be the most fun. But if you engage with this and get creative with this, this is an insanely awesome scenario. And he was right. I went into this scenario with a soldier, which is notoriously a class that is bad at skills. I had a lot of strength, I had a lot of con, I did not have a lot else going on. And I had a blast playing this scenario because I was just trying to come up with creative ways to use athletics checks to get through things, creative ways to help my allies, trying to find alternative solutions to scenarios. And I think we had 5 players for that one. Everybody was just cracking up and having a blast as we went on this ridiculous kind of relay race scavenger hunt type challenge. And even though my character, mathematically speaking, was terrible for that, I didn't have high charisma, I didn't have high int, I didn't have very many social skills. I had a blast doing it because I tried to create scenarios for other people to roleplay well. And let's go ahead and move into the GM section now. So let's say that you are a GM at one of those nightmare tables where nobody wants to talk. Everyone is super hesitant to get into roleplay. They're mostly there for combat. How do you incentivize these people to talk? And I think one of those things is to show them the impact that their words have on the world. And you can do that by raising and lowering the DCs of things. So let's imagine 2 scenarios here. Scenario 1 is they just say, okay, I'm going to make a diplomacy check to do this thing. And you go, okay, cool. What are you going to say? And if they freeze up there and they don't have an answer to that, go, okay, you can make the roll. The DC has gone up by 2 as you kind of stumble over your words. And I think the opposite of this should be true as well. If you go, what do you say? And then they have some good thoughts. And I think this can come in 2 different forms. I think this can come in you talking in character, or I think this can come in like bullet points. If you say, I want to talk about X, Y, and Z and bring up how this is connected, I think that's fine as well. And sometimes for things like say an Arcana check, when you are playing a high int character, if you don't feel like you really understand the science or the magic involved, but your character should, I think that's a time where you can just describe what your character is talking about. If you're not comfortable talking about the black holes or the arcane sigils or whatever, I think it's okay to say, yeah, I want to make an Arcana check to kind of talk to this wizard about this sort of magic that's going on here. I think these sorts of things are involved. And then you can make that roll and let the GM flush out some of the details as well. I think both of those things result in good involvement from the player. And I think in tense situations especially, no one being willing to roleplay should increase the DC of things. There's some bandits. You encounter them in the road. There's a standoff. One of the bandits says, who the hell are you all? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No response. DC goes up by 2. 6, 7. PCs will jump in after they hear that, right? And I think, putting some danger in a situation, like showing that those stakes are real if you don't get involved in the role play, and tying the role play to mechanic like risk and reward and penalties, I think is good. But I think this should be more carrot than stick. I would, as much as possible, try to reward players for the things that you want them to do. And you might need to lead the horse to water a little bit here at first. So the bandits turn to the group and say, "Who the hell are you?" That's one thing. The bandit captain turns, points to the closest person, and goes, "Who are you? I haven't seen you around here before. I've seen these other ones. I haven't seen you. Who the fuck are you?" And you kind of draw that attention to one PC and you try to give that PC a moment in the sun. And if they fire back a response quickly, that's great. And that's what you want, right? And you might go, okay, you chimed in quickly. The bandit is listening to you. The bandit lowers his weapon a little bit. You're going to have a lower DC for this check. You're going to get a +2 circumstance bonus to this check. I think doing that sort of things can help out a lot. And I think some players can be intimidated by open prompts. I know this happens at my own table sometimes where we will finish up something and the GM will go, "Okay, what do you all want to do?" And that is incredibly open-ended. And so you can change that question. Where do you want to go next? Or if you need to funnel it in even more, okay, so you all know that place X, Y, and Z might be good places to investigate. Do you want to check out one of these 3 places, or do you have another idea? And if you're still not getting any responses, that's where NPCs can be useful. An NPC can point to one of those player characters and go, "Player character, where do you think we should go? I'm thinking about doing this. Are you coming with me or am I going alone?" And that can give the party immediate interesting decisions, right? Are you going to leave that NPC off to go all by themselves to explore, potentially facing death? Are you going with them? Are you splitting the party? Don't split the party. But sometimes you might need to kind of dangle things a little bit until people get more comfortable. My group has been role-playing together for, something like 5 years at this point, so we're pretty comfortable. We're pretty good at sharing the table with each other and kind of taking turns making major decisions or kind of like brainstorming out of character as a group collective, and then someone takes point on the roleplay and moves forward. Another thing that you can do as a GM is reward good roleplay with combat incentives. And for those people who are really combat minded, that might be the thing that gets them excited about non-combat. So let's imagine a scenario where a town is about to be attacked by a small horde of goblins. And you turn to player number 1 and say, "The goblins are going to be here within 10 minutes. What does your character do to prepare for the attack? Do you want to talk to people? Do you want to fortify things? Do you want to warn people?" And let them know this will have an impact on the battle. And maybe they get an extra hero point for saving some people. Maybe they get to roll their initiative roll with a fortune effect because they are well prepared. Maybe they get to roll stealth for initiative because they set up a very sneaky trap that they are going to get to use on people. And you can mechanically tie in role-playing incentives to get people more comfortable doing things. And for the people who are, very much gamer pilled and they are kind of thinking about everything as a video game, what is the reward that I get for doing this? You can turn some of those role play things into direct numerical advantages in combat. And I think that's probably enough rambling here. And I'm going to wrap up today's video with kind of an education thing that I was told at some point. When, as a teacher, you ask a question, you should not expect an immediate answer just like that in most cases. If you ask a really easy question, that's true. What's 2 plus 2? 4. You expect that answer to be done super quickly, right? Whereas if you do something like, what's 25 times 17? You might be able to answer that question relatively easily, but it might take you a second, right? And I think with roleplay, you need to be understanding about that as well. What do you all want to do? Where do you want to go next? The players might need 30 seconds to think about that before they know what they, as the human being, want to do. And then it might take them a few more seconds beyond that to figure out what their PC would then say. So I think some expectation of silence is totally okay, especially for a more difficult question. And sometimes the role playing questions are easy and simple. You're just chatting with some shopkeeper, those stakes are low. And other times it's going to be, I think you're the one who killed my father. Why shouldn't I gun you down right now? That is a high stakes scenario, right? And even if this person is totally innocent, they might need to go like, okay, how do I get myself out of this scenario? And I don't think the time expectation or the character you are playing is the same as the time expectation in real life. If someone says that to you in real life, you better start talking now. If someone says that to you in this game, you might need to think, what would my character do? How would my character respond here? And that might take a second, and I think that's totally fine and okay. And I also think it is fine for the player at the table to go like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Hold on, I need to think about this for a second before they give a response. I've totally had plenty of moments at tables where I've just watched someone go, oh, that's tough. Hold on. And they take a second to collect themselves, they get back in character, and then they go. Something that I was told as a teacher early on was that if you ask a reasonable question, 7 seconds before a follow-up is fine. So, all right, what do you think this word means? And then you pause for a second. And then if you don't know, then you might poke them. And I think the same sort of tool is really useful as a GM. Where do you want to go? Pause for a second. Let them think. If you don't get anything back from them, maybe you narrow that down a little bit for them. Or you say, all right, X person, what are you thinking about in this moment? Y person, what are you thinking about in this moment? And then after you go through each person, then collectively you can go, okay, in character, now what are you going to do? Silence is not necessarily a bad thing. People need to think sometimes. And with that, I hope this very, very different week of content is still useful and entertaining to all of you. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and my more analytic, long-form content will return next week. Not quite sure what I'm going to talk about yet, but I've got some cool ideas involving items that I think I might go into. All right. Have a great rest of the day, folks. See ya.